On today's episode, we welcome back Laura Bellamy, head coach of the Harvard women's hockey team. She shares some helpful information on Ivy League athletics, gives us an update on the Harvard women's team, provides some insights on goalies, and advice on the current recruiting environment. This is a great conversation with Laura, so please enjoy. Welcome to the ChampsEyeQ podcast. ChampsEyeQ is your recruiting and development co-pilot. If you are a player, parent, or coach, make sure to check out more content and tools to help navigate the world of youth hockey at champs.app. Also, if you've listened to the ChampsEyeQ podcast in the past and it has helped you with your recruiting or hockey development, please tell your teammates and friends about ChampsEyeQ. It would be even better if you subscribe to the podcast and review or rate us on whichever platform you're listening to or watching us on. Tired of spending hours emailing coaches with no idea if they're even reading your messages? ChampsEyeQ messaging is the fast, easy way to send personalized, error-free emails and know exactly when they've been opened. The coach's name, school, and email are automatically populated for you, so every message is accurate and complete. Choose from smart templates that pull your details directly from your ChampsEyeQ profile, whether you're sharing your schedule or a new video. Cut your email time in half and finally see which teams are showing interest. One parent told us, what used to take a whole evening now takes under 2 hours. ChampsEyeQ messaging, faster, smarter recruiting, made easy. I'd like to welcome back to the podcast Harvard women's hockey head coach, Laura Bellamy. Originally from Duluth, Minnesota, Laura was a captain of the Harvard women's team and standout goalie, winning 16 games during her Ivy League career. After graduation, she immediately joined the coaching ranks as an assistant at Harvard and then an associate head coach at Minnesota Duluth. In August 2023, Laura was named as the head coach at Harvard. So welcome back, Laura.
Thanks for having me again. Appreciate it.
Hey, congrats on a pretty good start to the season. Before we get into the whole podcast and get into all the details, I just want to let folks know that since this is not your first time on the podcast, I'm not going to ask you how you started playing hockey in Minnesota. I'm also not going to talk too much about Harvard, the school, such as balancing hockey and academics and the facilities, because we've talked about those multiple times on the podcast, specifically with your former teammate, Lindsay Fry, in episode 9, episode 39 with Lee J. Mirasolo when she was an assistant coach, and of course, your episode while you were at Minnesota Duluth, episode 49. So if folks want to learn more about those things, they can go listen to those episodes. But why don't we start with you with just talking about how you got the job at Harvard?
Well, having played at Harvard from 2009 to 2013, I loved my experience. I loved the school, the hockey, and everything that came with it. So really, once I left and I decided to get into coaching, it was always something that was on my mind, a place that I knew I'd love to get back to if I ever had the opportunity. So when that opportunity came about in June or July of 2023, I put my name in the hat, put my best foot forward in that application process, and feel very fortunate to have the opportunity that I do now to be the head coach.
Gotcha. And so I am going to ask you a couple of Ivy League related questions. Obviously, you were you had all the credentials that you needed, both coming from Harvard, having coached there, and then, had a great coaching stint at Minnesota Duluth and a lot of success there. But let's just talk just a little bit about kind of Ivy League recruiting for hockey players. Just so folks know it, there's always a slightly different variation of an answer that I get from coaches, so I'll ask you that. But first question is, what kind of grades do you need to go to get into Harvard and play hockey? So, parents always want to know what kind of grades do my kids need to have?
Yeah, I think really anywhere in college hockey, it's important to have done well in high school. The Ivy League and Harvard in particular, the admissions process is very thorough. So strong academic success is important. Obviously, we're looking for hockey players, so we recruit student athletes every year for our team. And the better grades, the better off you are. Certainly, testing is a part of it for us too, the standardized tests, so ACT, SAT. For Harvard, they could admit all students who had perfect SAT scores, and that's not what they do. They're more thorough like I said, with the process, it includes an interview. There's letters from guidance counselors. So there's a lot of pieces to it. And I think that's important. They really are looking for the whole person. So the academic piece is important. I think the biggest things are taking the hardest course load you can while still being able to have success. And success depends on where you are too, whether it's in Canada, it's averages, A's, B's, C's in the US. So, and then obviously internationally too. So everyone has a different grade scale, but the better you are, the better off you're going to be for our application process. And when we put those forward, it's important that you've not only challenged yourself throughout your high school career, but also, it's they're not looking for perfection. Even I think a lot of our cases, it's players or student athletes get stronger and stronger academically as they're in high school, and that bodes well too. So, there's not a black and white answer to that question, but the more you challenge yourself and the better you do, the better off you're going to be.
And I know you're going to say the answer is it depends and there's no exact number, but is there any minimum that you kind of need? Like, does it have to be higher than a B or like an 80%? Or is it, well, just be as good as you can be and that's it?
Yeah, I mean, certainly in the A range is what we're looking for. I think if you wanted a more specific answer, it really does matter how it's paired with the testing aspect too. So, and the the better you do on your test, then that's gonna help. Maybe there's a little bit more room on the GPA side, but at the same time, the GPA and how you do in school, it is really important because that's 4 years, that's every day, that's at your school, that, those teachers that you work with every day. So that's going to be important no matter what. And I think, it goes a really long way when you have your school supporting how hard you work every day. And really it's that process. So there's the result, which is the grade, but how do you go about it? What kind of work ethic do you have? What have you put into it? How much have you challenged yourself? Those are all extremely important too, and why it is really hard to give a black and white answer because everybody's journey is a little bit different and the result matters on some level, but there's so much more to it than that. What kind of student are you? When you come to, what Harvard admissions is looking for is when you're at our school, what are you going to be like? What does putting your best foot forward look like? Are you going to challenge yourself? Are you going to take a lot of different courses that help you learn about the world in different ways? What are you interested in? What kind of concentration are you looking at when you're to come to Harvard? So that's really the most important piece, is making sure that everybody who's admitted is going to push Harvard forward, both athletically for us and academically as well.
Gotcha. And I distinctly remember Lindsay Fry's answer on this one was it's harder. The hard part is getting in. Once you're in, you could actually handle all the academics. So because the screening process is so good. So that was kind of a good rule of thumb. Seems like you agree.
Yeah, I think there's just so much support once you're at Harvard, whether it's your first year proctor, your first year academic advisor, then when you choose a concentration, you have a concentration advisor. One really unique thing about Harvard is living on campus for all 4 years. So even when you're a sophomore, junior, senior, you still have a resident tutor who oversees your day-to-day life, both academically and socially. And the community is just so tight knit because of that. I think that's really unique and something as a coach, our team is like family and we spend a lot of time together. But when our players leave the rink, we know that they're going to be really well taken care of in another small community across the river, which is our campus and the house that they live in. So there's just so much support that, that would be my thought on that. It is a process to get in, but once you're at Harvard, you're really well supported and everyone around you wants you to succeed.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. The second other most common question about Harvard and Ivy Leagues is how does financial aid work? Because there are no athletic or academic scholarships at Harvard or other Ivy League schools.
Yep. So financial aid is all need based and goes through our financial aid office. So obviously I was at a scholarship school before. It's a little bit different. That's, in that case, the coaches are in control of what the financial piece looks like. And for us, it's our financial aid office. And Harvard does an unbelievable job. There's fantastic financial support I believe over half of our students are on financial aid, and they're continuing to do work to support our students so that if someone wants to come to Harvard and is able to get into Harvard, they want to do everything they can to make it affordable to families. So that's a part of our process too that we go through, and that's the financial aid office that's in control of that.
Gotcha. Okay, perfect. Thanks. We got the kind of the basics of Ivy League and Harvard kind of out of the way. Now let's get to you and coming back to Harvard as the head coach. What was the culture like when you returned to Harvard? Obviously there's a huge history of success. You got some Hall of Famers, that have come through the Harvard program. But I'm not sure it was at its peak when you arrived.
Right, exactly. I think that's one thing about Harvard women's hockey is the success that we've had. It's a tradition of success, tradition of excellence. We have many Olympians in our program's history, Patty Kazmaier award winners. I mean, names that are in the Hockey Hall of Fame, and just a really rich tradition of high level athletes and championship success. So that's something that has always excited me about our program. And when I came in, that wasn't the case in recent years, and that's my job to bring us back to a place of competitive success. And it certainly doesn't happen overnight, but we're in the middle of that build now, and it's been extremely purposeful, and I wake up every day excited to get us back to that place. And I don't think it's just winning hockey games. That's a piece of it, but it's also creating a culture that players, student athletes want to be a part of to chase their best, see how good they can be both on the ice and off the ice, and make sure that everyone in our program has a role, understands their role, everyone's a valued member no matter what that role looks like, and having that culture where you're going to be supported no matter what. That's part of success too. It's not just wins and losses. So there's a lot of pieces to it, but it's a project that I feel very fortunate to have this opportunity, and like I said, I wake up every day excited to keep getting after it.
Want honest feedback on where your game is at today? ChampsEyeQ gives you an unbiased look at where you are and what you need to work on. Just submit at least 10 minutes of your edited shift, and our expert scouts will provide an objective, data-driven analysis of your game. We'll evaluate you on more than 15 skills, giving you both an overall rating and an assessment of your Division I potential. You'll know exactly where you stand and what you need to do to improve. Get your report today. And what was your assessment of like the talent that you had? What did you have when you get there? Were the cupboards bare? Was it a young team? What was your kind of overall assessment of where you wanted to prioritize, where you wanted to put your efforts to see improvement?
The biggest thing, recruiting is always going to be a huge aspect of college hockey, whether that's, no matter where you're at, whether you have scholarships or you don't, whether you can get transfer student athletes or you don't, whether you're an Ivy League school or you're not. I mean, we all have differences. I think that's the fun part of college hockey, and recruiting is extremely important no matter where you're at. That was certainly a big part of what we did at Duluth in our build there. And so that was a focus right away. I think for us, we want to make sure we're drawing the best players from all over the world. So we'll travel wherever to make sure that happens. I think that's one piece of Harvard where, when I was going through it, I met people from all over the world. The Harvard undergraduate enrollment, last year we had people from 102 different countries. So on a women's hockey team, you're not going to have players from 102 different countries, but to have people from different places who are really the best from where they are from, that's going to help us lead us to success. So recruiting was a focus right off the bat. I think what I recognized with the team we had is our players work extremely hard, and they're committed to play however we need to play to get this thing moving forward. So that's been a big piece of our success as we've moved along from year one to year two. I think we've really commanded respect with the way we play in our end. Our players are tough, they're resilient. We set a program record in block shots last year, so I think that tells a little bit of the story. And now the next step forward is driving possession, having the puck more, being able to play defense through offense. If you have the puck, you're not getting scored on. So that's our progression. But what has stood out to me from day one is the work ethic, what our players are willing to do to like I said, move this forward, continue to have success, and hopefully win it more and more hockey games and get ourselves to a championship level again.
Great. And so I just want to talk just a little bit about your first couple of years and the team, if that's okay.
Mhm.
When I invited you back on the podcast, I actually hadn't checked your record from last year. And so I didn't realize how challenging it was that only two official wins, although many overtime games that just didn't go your way, and you didn't win a game after November 1st. And you actually had a better year technically in terms of the results of the first year, but you also just struggled to score goals, from what I could tell
Mhm.
last year, which explains a lot of your strong defensive play on that. What was it like, last year? I'm sure that was a surprise for you, given probably how competitive almost every single one of your games was, in the back half of the season, and yet not winning. Like, was it hard to keep the players motivated, especially the seniors who, this was their final season? What was that like going through that tough time?
I think, when you said technically a step down from year one to year two in terms of results, that's i- it's not all about that piece of it. Like wins and losses, again, it's important. You want to win hockey games, you want to get results over time. That's absolutely something that's going to be a piece of our how we determine success is whether or not we have competitive success. But I think when you look at year one to year two, we were a much better hockey team. So the results weren't necessarily there, but games were tighter. The first year we were not very competitive in a lot of our games, and certainly we play in a really good league. And that first year was tough. I think last year, it was probably 7 or 8 overtime games. I think almost half of our games, if not half of them, were decided by a goal. So it was, the needle was moving for sure in terms of the product we were putting on the ice, how competitive we were, how close the games were, and really I think year two was about the style that we were playing. We were tough to play against, and coaches in our league, we would when I spoke to them after games, it was like we don't want to play you, and that was a huge step. So now moving forward to win hockey games, like you said, it's continuing to defend that way and be really hard to play against, be a tough opponent no matter what. And that's something, when you speak about our seniors, I think they were a big piece of that style, committed to we'll play however we have to play to be in games, give ourselves a chance to win. And now it's what's so powerful in that is that's our identity. That's a huge part of what we continue to do as we get better offensively, bring in players who are going to help us create our returning players continue to develop on the offensive side of the puck. So now when we have it more, when we're driving possession, we're trying to score more goals, we're not losing sight of our identity, that foundation that we built in really year one and year two, to be committed to shot blocking and being hard to play against, being physical, playing tough. So I think, you can't understate how important that was. And we didn't again see those results in year two, but I think it will pay dividends in the future for many, many years because of what it's meant for the style of play that we bring.
Gotcha. So given the results of last year, what did you do over the summer to prepare for this season? Because you're already off to a much better start. You've already 250% more wins this year than last year, and it's only the middle of November.
Yeah.
So, what was the summer like in terms of just preparing for this season?
The summer is always a lot of different things. It's, meeting as a staff pretty consistently to figure out what things do we want to continue to do? Do we want to hang on to? Do we feel like went well? And then also, deciding what areas of our game are gonna maybe need a change, or maybe there might be a different way we can run things based on the personnel we have. But I will say, this season isn't about just this past summer. This has been a build from August 7th of 2023 was my first day on the job. And really the work started then, to recruit this incoming class. It's been 2 years of setting a standard in our program, what that looks like. I think our returning players, so sophomores, juniors, seniors right now, they've now heard our messaging on what that looks like, what kind of work it's going to take for the last 2 years. And they've been really committed to that. That those players continue to put in the work in the weight room in the summer, develop on the ice. And so it's a lot of different pieces. I would say the summer is really the tail end of that preparation for this season. It goes back years, and it's going to be something we continue to do year in and year out, is recruit players that are going to come in and make us better, and then make sure the ones in our program are developing as well, because we really want to graduate players who are playing in the PWHL and playing on the national team, and obviously that's making our team better no matter what. So it's a process, it takes time, but this summer was really about, okay, how do we change, tweak some things that our team now it's gonna suit them well, for us to be able to have even more success than we had in year two.
Gotcha. So, how did you set goals for the season? So, you mentioned it earlier. You are in, a very, very tough conference, the ECAC, with 12 teams, and some pretty impressive teams like Cornell and Quinnipiac, and I can probably name another six other ones. So it's very hard to win the ECAC, and even just make it to the national tournament. So, what's your focus? What are your goals? Is it like to win an Ivy League? Is it to win the Bean Pot? Or is it just to just do as well as you can within this season and build towards future seasons?
We're really fortunate. You kind of hit on this a little bit. We're really fortunate. We're the only school that can play for an Ivy League title, an ECAC title, and a Bean Pot title all in the same year every year. And I just love that about where we're at, because you have things that you're playing for all the time. And, you know, that just makes it that much more exciting. I think especially the Bean Pot, it's such a unique opportunity. You're playing in front of tens of thousands of people at TD Garden now that the tournament is at TD Garden. This will be the third straight year, and it's just grown and grown. So that opportunity and what we're able to do every year, that's always going to be circled. The Bean Pot's always a tournament that we want to win. I think for us right now, a lot of our talk at the beginning of the year was each game we're playing to win. So each game we go into, we know we can win. We've prepared to win. Our focus is on how do we get it done and making it happen. And that's really a shift in mindset. That's not a place that we were really able to be in year one, or even in year two a little bit, because we weren't quite on that level competitively. Now we feel that we are. And so the focus is really one game at a time. Each game we go into, okay, our goal is to win this game. What does that look like? And I think that's goal oriented from we'll always maintain a process oriented outlook, but I think that is the goal chopped up into our 30 pieces of 30 games. And that was the focus from day one. Like I said, so much of what we're doing right now is really shifting mentality and shifting habits before we get results. So that's something that, if we're consistent on our habits, we over time, we know the results we can expect, but it takes time. We've come a really long way, and we've got a long road in front of us too, and that's the exciting part.
And speaking of unique experiences, you have another unique experience coming up, the Friendship Four in Belfast. I've heard the announcer Pierre Maguire talk about this for a couple of years. He raves about the experience for college hockey players, and you're going to get to play your old team, Minnesota Duluth. There, maybe just talk about just what your plan is and what your expectations are for heading over to Ireland.
It's so exciting is what we do as college hockey coaches. We're trying to, again, of course, be as competitive as possible. You want to win championships. And then from an individual perspective, we want to develop our players into great people who are going to go be leaders in whatever they do. Especially at Harvard, you're going to have a lot of opportunity, and I think learn a ton of leadership skills while you're in our program. And that piece of it, that experience that we're providing for student athletes, is really important to us. And we're very fortunate. Friends of Harvard Hockey has been extremely supportive to make this happen. Our men's hockey team went to the Friendship Four last year, and then now we're able to take this opportunity this season. But the NCAA, we're allowed to go international every 4 years. That's something we are very committed to making that happen. And so when this opportunity came around, I mean, to be able to provide that experience for our team, those are memories they're going to have for the rest of their lives. We're extremely excited to go over there, spend that time together, have a cultural experience, and obviously the hockey is a big part of it too. We're going to be well prepared in the new year for a WCHA team and get to play Duluth. But just being able to go over there with the team, we've had our men's hockey team, some of our alums had gone over to Finland and Sweden in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And then there was a trip to Czechoslovakia at the time, as well, that, the memories that they have from that, and the bonds of those teams are really strong. So excited for our group to have that same opportunity. And we're very fortunate that we have the support to do it.
Perfect. Perfect. All right. A couple more questions about your team before we get into the recruiting side of things. The first one is, what are your expectations of the leaders of your team in terms of running the team? I've talked about this with a couple of coaches, how, once the coaches leave the room, it's the players that actually run the team. What's your perspective, and what are your expectations of leaders on the team?
I think the biggest piece of the expectation is to set the standard, hold the standard, and that's not easy to do. I think that means not being liked all the time. That means having hard conversations. That means exemplifying what that standard is, and being okay getting uncomfortable to make sure that everybody's meeting that. So I think, for us, it's really important that our captains are an extension of the coaching staff, and of course an extension of the team. We're all on the same team. We all want our program to have success. So our communication with our captains, we have a weekly meeting that's on the schedule. So that's an hour-long meeting that we're always committed to. It's actually 8 a.m. Monday morning. So we start the week with that, which is pretty fun. We all look forward to it, and have really good conversation. And then from there, it's daily communication, and touching base, and just knowing, having a pulse of where things are at. So it's really important for them to know, okay, how's the team doing, but how are individual players doing? How do we help everybody have success? How do we help everybody be at their best? Who's doing well? Who can we lean on? Who might need some support? And so that piece is really important too. So it's not an easy job, but I think our leaders this year have done a fantastic job, and they're a big reason why we're taking huge steps forward from last year to this year.
Gotcha. Perfect. All right. Thank you. So we've gotten this far in the podcast, and I haven't asked you a goalie question yet. So we've got with the first one. So I noticed you're using three goalies. That's kind of unusual, that you have multiple goalies having more than one game so far so early in the season. I believe you played 12 games, I think, and you have each of your goalies has played a minimum of 2 games. So what's your philosophy on managing that trio?
My philosophy is win hockey games, whatever that looks like. Put our best foot forward to put ourselves in that spot. So for us, I think it is really unique. I think all three of our goalies are high caliber. They all bring different things to the table. I do think it's something you'd be hard pressed to find at a scholarship school, because most scholarship schools are, and things have changed now in the last couple of years, but a lot of scholarship schools were giving full scholarship to two goaltenders, and then probably not in most cases to their third, or there might be partial. I mean, different schools do different things, but it for a long time there, it was really hard to devote three scholarships to three goalies. So whether it was two or two and a half, there's a lot of different philosophies on that. But I think that's part of the reason why you don't necessarily see it. And I've always felt that's an advantage at the Ivy League schools, because we don't have athletic scholarship. It's really go find the best players you can find and bring them in and have them compete with each other. And I think that's been huge for us. All three of our goalies are really good. They've competed. I think they've had great preseason. So we had a little bit of a rotation going, but it's been really competitive. And what our goalies are committed to is we're going to compete as hard as possible in practice to make ourselves better, make each other better, help make the team better, because there's no position that makes the team better in practice as much as the goaltender. So they understand that their role in that. And then no matter what, whoever's going, they get your full support on game day, because we want everybody to go in there and pitch a shutout. That's the goal. That's putting the team first. So no matter who's in there, they have support. But during the week, I mean, it's been extremely competitive, and that's why all three of our goalies have played.
Gotcha. Now, how do you manage the psychology of those three goalies? Because all of them want to be in the net. You can only play one of them. Well, I went back and looked at your elite prospects profile, and from what I got is in your sophomore and junior year, you basically played almost all your games, and then you had an Olympian come in your senior year, and then you got basically half or a little less than half of the games. Like, so you understand the psychology of, geez, I want to be playing all the time, but now I'm not playing all the time. How do you manage that with your players, since obviously you've been through this?
Yeah, I think sometimes we make the goaltending position, we act like it's different than anybody else, and it is, in terms of, obviously, one is in there, and for everybody else, you're it is a little bit different in that way, but ultimately everybody wants to play. Everybody wants to play and have a piece in the team's success, and that's just part of it. So leaning into that competition is the best thing you can do. There's only so much you can control. I can control my game, and then when my goalie partner goes in, that's for her to control, and I'm just going to support her however I can. So goaltending's changed a lot too since I played. Now I think, just with the wear and tear, and what kind of hips we have come into college, because they've been playing goalie for a long time, and the butterfly position, and down for most of their career, it's a little bit different. You see most programs use two goalies, and so in our case, to have three, I think, is just a huge advantage. And like you said, from a psychological standpoint, of course you want to play and you want to have consistency in that. But I think for us, that's why practice is so important. It's just as important as games in terms of your preparation, because if it's only games that can get you to a certain level of being locked in and ready to go and getting better, then you're going to ebb and flow on whether or not you're in the net. So it's really making sure you're taking advantage of practice days as well, to stay on top of your game, use that as a challenge just as much as game time, and stay ready. It's ultimately be ready to go when your number's called, and I think it's only made our goalie group better to have as much competition as we do right now.
And of course, nothing better than having a former goalie as your coach to kind of help walk them through those experiences. All right, let's move over to the recruiting side. And so I need to ask you this question. Given the increased public attention and scrutiny that Harvard has received over the last couple of years, how, if at all, has this affected your experience attracting and recruiting top-tier student athletes to your program?
We approach recruiting the same way every year, and certainly you want to learn things as you go to get better at it, and provide a good recruiting experience to the student athletes that we're recruiting. But for us, we stay the course. I think Harvard's a great place to be. We're in Boston. The location is fantastic. We're obviously providing an Ivy League education, and a Division I hockey experience in a great league. And like I talked about earlier, just the opportunity to play in the Ivy League, the ECAC, the Bean Pot. So what we're able to offer student athletes from an experience standpoint, the international trip, you could add to it. And really, from my own experience, I can just say that it changed my life forever in all the best ways possible. And I was pushed more at Harvard than I think I could have been pushed anywhere else, and that just made me better. And while I was pushed, I was also supported on a really high level. So if we're continuing to provide that, what we've seen is that we continue to have high interest in our program and our school, and what we're looking for is what student athletes can come in and help move us forward, who's going to take advantage of that opportunity that's at their fingertips, and take advantage of what's in front of them academically, and also help our program get back to championship level success. So for us, nothing's changed. We just stay the course, and it's a pretty I feel very fortunate to be able to be recruiting to a place that's not only going to change people's lives, but is somewhere that I just hold really near and dear to my own heart, and have an experience that I'll forever be grateful for.
Got it. Okay. So when you first got back to Harvard as the head coach, I had heard that you put a huge priority on recruiting Minnesota players. Now you mentioned you look for players all around the world, but how true is it that you've really given your experience at Minnesota Duluth, and obviously you being a Minnesotan, have you really kind of increased the recruiting pool in Minnesota since you got back to Harvard?
Yeah, it's really about finding the best players you can find. And class to class, you might have different needs or different things you're looking for. That ice behind you, appreciate that picture of Bright Landry Hockey Center, but that ice plays fast. It always has, and we want to recruit to that, have good skaters, good speed. So wherever you can find that, that's where we're going to be. Certainly Minnesota has a history of producing top level Division 1 talent, and I think across the board pretty good skaters. So that's definitely an area we focus on, as well as all parts of the US really. So in our own area in Boston and in Massachusetts, you see high level players out of that state every year, but it's really throughout the US, throughout Canada. Toronto is obviously a hotbed, Western Canada as well, and then Europe. So to me, it's more about, who fits what we are able to offer, who can make us better. And those hotbeds are always going to be a focus no matter what school you're at. So no different for us to lean into Minnesota a little bit among other places.
Got it. Okay. And last goalie question then for you. So last time you were on the podcast, you mentioned that the way you love to evaluate goalies is to get on the ice with them, and in 10 minutes you can kind of pretty much know how good they are. So here's my reverse question to that: is how do you evaluate goalies if you can't get on the ice with them? So like I know you can get on at the USA hockey camps, but you have at least one Canadian goalie, and so you can't get on to the USA the Hockey Canada camp. So how do you get on?
Yeah.
How do you do this without getting on the ice with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think camps and different events remain pretty important for that reason, so that you can try to get out there. Obviously, I said that as an assistant coach it's sometimes a little bit different as a head coach. It might not be me who's out there, especially given what my shot looks like these days. It's not quite the same. But it's really people you trust, whether that's, I think for the most part, our own staff, if our own staff can get out and be on the ice with players, if not them, then other people you trust in hockey. And again, I go back to it goes a long way if they themselves have actually worked with that student athlete. And you could say that really about any position, but I think goalie in particular, you can get some really good information if they've been able to work with the player, shoot on them like we talked about. And so if not me, then someone I trust and someone our staff can lean on, and that information goes a long way to help us figure that out.
Okay, perfect. All right, no more goalie questions. Last couple of recruiting questions, and then I'll let you go. So where are you at in the recruiting process right now? From my math, it looks like you are full for 2026s and 2027s. In fact, seems like you might be adding a couple of additional forwards over the next couple of years to expand your roster to from 23 to 25 players. So where are you at these days? Are you now focused on, I guess it would be 2029s? So is that where your focus is these
Yeah,
days?
2028s are coming up this June. So
That's the 28th, yeah.
we yeah, it's one of those things that you never stop recruiting a certain class. You never stop watching players of every age, because you just never know what can happen, whether that's injuries in your own roster or just fluctuation in general, any kind of movement that you want to be ready for. So that's something that work never ends. But right now, in it's November heading into next June is when we'll start to talk to 2028s. It's really just getting out, watching as much as possible, working on our depth charts, having names, knowing who we want to go after, and making sure we're having conversations with people around them to help us, get to know what they're like. As much as information as you can have ahead of time is helpful. So and then obviously when June 15th comes, it's really fun to be able to speak directly with those players and their families. But until then, it's really just doing the work behind the scenes to look at what we want, what we feel is going to move our program forward, and who we think might fit those roles. So that part's it's all fun part of the process, but recruiting kind of ebbs and flows in that way. Then the contact goes way up in June, and the summer's busy in terms of conversation. But right now it's really just getting into the ranks and making sure we meet consistently to be on the same page as a coaching staff.
Gotcha. All right. And this most recent recruiting cycle was highly accelerated. You participated in it because, like you said, it's still early November and you're pretty much full for 2027s. So what's your perspective on this accelerated recruiting cycle? What's driving it, and what advice do you have for parents of players who are likely to go through it, next June?
It's a great question. How and why it was as accelerated as it was. I'll be honest, I wasn't necessarily expecting that. I do wonder how much, the changing landscape affected that when you're talking about NIL opportunities and different things that schools can offer now. I wonder if that was part of it. I do, I think there's so much to the process, but I guess my advice would be, make your decision when you're sure, and you can really only know that based on how you feel. I think it's you have your whole next couple of years of high school in front of you, as well as the college opportunity that you're looking at. So to make a quick or hurried decision as much as possible, I I think it's really important to try to be patient and take your time and really know that that's where you wanna be, and sometimes players do know, they've maybe had opportunities to visit campuses and know a lot about certain schools, so by the time June 15th, hits, there probably are a lot of players who have a good idea and have done a lot of research, but, I just think that's an important piece, and as much as possible, be patient, take your time, because it's obviously a big decision and one that you don't wanna feel hurried or rushed into.
Gotcha. And if I remember correctly, the Harvard camp is usually late July. I'm not sure if it's same thing next year, but it's typically right around that time. So that's an opportunity for folks who are really interested in Harvard to actually be on campus and see everything they need to see for in the recruiting process.
Yeah, the camps are a great opportunity. So, we've done satellite camps last year and then this year as well out to Minnesota and in Toronto. So those are in June, ahead of June 15th. And then our camp, like you said, early July, it's July 7th to 9th of 2026, which will open up soon. But I think, that timing for us has worked out really nicely. And some of it just has to do with, your own building and whether there's ice in and what kind of dates work out. But for us, what we like about that is it's a couple weeks into having started to talk to players. So it's really nice to be able to get that touch point, on our campus and show them around and be able to work with players a couple weeks out from June 15th. So that date has worked out well for us.
Perfect. Well, Laura, I want to thank you so much for coming back on the podcast. Appreciate you giving us the whole update on everything that you've been doing at Harvard. Great to see you off to a great start. Wish you the best with the rest of the season, and thank you for answering all these recruiting questions that I'm sure lots of folks wanted to know the answers to.
Thanks for having me on again.
I really want to thank Laura for coming back on the podcast. It was great to get an update on the Harvard women's hockey program under her leadership. You can connect with Laura on the Harvard team website or via her Champs app profile. Links to both are in the show notes.